This armed tribesman is a soldier in the Middle East's forgotten war, a small, unpublicized conflict between Arab and Arab, which has already caused hundreds of deaths. This is the border area between North and South Yemen, two entirely separate nations with very differing views on the role and future of this part of the Arabian Peninsula. The present dispute's been simmering for several years, but in recent weeks there's been sustained fighting involving heavy artillery, tanks and even aircraft. The political division of Yemen into north and south is of recent origin. What isn't recent is the Yemenis' reputation as a fierce and warlike people. Back in the Middle Ages, a dispute over a camel called Batul led to 100 years' war between rival tribes. The latest conflict is more seriously grounded, but it began in typically Yemeni fashion. Earlier this year, a North Yemeni sheikh and 65 of his followers were invited to a feast and a parley on the other side of the border, only to be massacred one and all by their southern hosts. Although the present conflict may appear obscure, it's certainly not insignificant. The two Yemens are situated at the mouth of the Red Sea, a highly strategic corner of one of the world's chronically sensitive areas. Any instability is of great concern to their neighbors, such as Saudi Arabia and the other oil-rich sheikdoms of the Gulf. The Romans knew Yemen as Arabia Felix, or fertile Arabia. In fact, it's only fertile in comparison with the sandy wastes of the Arabian desert to the north of it. Neither Yemen has any oil wealth of its own, and both countries are by any standards poor. These scenes could have been filmed either side of the border. In fact, they're in South Yemen, a country nearly as big as Spain, with a population of only 1.5 million. South Yemen, officially known as the People's Democratic Republic of Yemen, is ruled from Aden, the former British colony and staging post. Aden was, for many years, one of the vital links in Britain's military strategy east of Suez. But important as it was, it became too hot for the British to hold. This was Aden in 1967. A 4-year battle for independence had gradually eroded British authority in the colony. Terrorist attacks and bombings became almost daily occurrences, and British troops were stretched to the limit. As in Cyprus, the British found themselves facing not just one enemy, but two. Aden's freedom fighters were split between the National Liberation Front and the Front for the Liberation of Occupied South Yemen, or FLOSSY. Rivalry between the two groups was intense, and British troops were often caught in the crossfire. The continuing toll of British lives and property, together with a revision of Britain's east of Suez policy, combined to make independence inevitable. In November 1967, the last British troops beat a hasty retreat. By this time, the struggle between the rival Adenese factions was largely over. The National Liberation Front had won, and thousands of FLOSSY men were driven into exile in the north. The streets of Aden were filled with the jubilant supporters of the National Liberation Front. After nearly 130 years of colonial rule, Aden and its hinterland of former sheikdoms was an independent nation. The new leadership was determinedly left-wing, but lasted only 18 months before being swept away by an even more extreme branch of the NLF, a regime now committed to spreading Marxist revolution. During the colonial period, much of Aden's wealth had been controlled by Britons or other foreigners, a state of affairs which the new Marxist leadership set out to remedy as quickly as possible. A series of workers' revolts ended in the nationalization of large sectors of the economy, including banking, insurance, and many smaller businesses such as cinemas and petrol stations. The effect was not entirely beneficial. Many businessmen fled to the north, leading to a severe shortage of private investment capital. In the years since independence, Aden port has suffered a serious decline. 8 years ago, for example, nearly 6,500 ships and 20,000 visitors passed through it. By 1970, the figures had dropped to 1,600 ships and a mere 3,000 visitors. This has been due mainly, of course, to the closure of the Suez Canal, which happened a few months before independence. Aden's historic role as a free port ended in 1969, when import duties of up to 45% were introduced. A small free zone has been left for the entrepot trade, but Aden is facing growing competition from ports such as Djibouti across the Red Sea. The place of the cargo ships has been taken by the occasional Egyptian or Soviet destroyer. Relations with Egypt are better now than at independence, and the Soviet Union is a major provider of financial and military aid. One installation which was not nationalized was the British oil refinery, which is now one of the few dependable sources of foreign exchange earnings. It's one area where South Yemen can't afford to put political convictions before economic necessity. Amongst the problems which the British left behind them in Aden was a shortage of educational opportunities. Illiteracy was high, and schools were in short supply, especially in the country areas. The new regime's aiming to overcome such deficiencies, but it's hampered by shortage of funds. South Yemen is a secular nation. There's no mention of Islam in the constitution, and Aden's schoolgirls are as liberated in dress and outlook as any in the Middle East. South Yemen's economic difficulties are in evidence everywhere. The fishing industry, for example, is of vital importance to the Yemenis, who are among the biggest fish eaters in the world. And yet, since independence, the annual fish catch has almost halved. The situation's not entirely the fault of the new regime. Under British rule, Aden received £22 million sterling in subsidies from London. This aid was withdrawn abruptly at independence, and the new rulers found themselves in charge of a country whose income covered only a third of its expenses. The government tackled its deficit by steadily increasing taxes and reducing salaries. Some Adenis complain that life in the Republic is now a mere dull struggle for existence. It's certainly true that the disappearance of the big spenders of colonial days has led to a more uniform society where a taste for luxury or frivolous entertainment is totally out of place. Despite its economic difficulties, the government's pressed ahead with one of its most radical measures, land reform. Before independence, most of the cultivable land belonged to the feudal sheikhs of the hinterland. Now a start's been made in distributing land to the peasants who actually work it. Farming methods range from biblical to modern. Since over half of the country is wasteland, much will depend on the success of the reforms. Some land has been distributed to peasants in 3- and 4-acre plots, and some collective farms have also been set up. Although both sides in the war have portrayed themselves as the injured party, it's the South Yemenis who've actually produced the evidence. As early as February this year, they took newsmen to the border outpost of Bayhan and showed them 100 Ford trucks they said they'd captured during a raid by 2,000 North Yemenis. Also displayed were dozens of crates of ammunition and weapons which included rifles, mortars and machine guns. The boxes bore Saudi Arabian and American labels. The incident marked the beginning of an escalation that erupted into today's hot war along Yemen's borders. This is Sana'a, capital of North Yemen, or as it's officially called, the Yemen Arab Republic. It's an ancient capital of an ancient land. The old city walls look as solid and secure today as when they were first erected centuries ago. In this obscure part of the Middle East, even the present seems to be a part of history. Until 10 years ago, North Yemen was ruled for 11 centuries by the imams, all-powerful feudal monarchs who were spiritual as well as temporal leaders. This coach was used by the last of them, the Imam al-Badr, deposed in a bloodless coup d'etat in 1962. His palaces in both Sana'a and Taiz are preserved as museums. The imams quite literally had power of life and death over every subject in the land. From this throne they dispensed their own personal justice to petitioners who gathered to air grievances or seek favors. The throne remains, but above it now are photographs of Yemen's new ruler, President of the Republic, Adil Rahman al-Ghani. Also preserved are these lions, fearsome symbols of the Imam's power. Housed in dens below the palace, they were kept for show on ceremonial occasions. The analogy between king of the animals and lord over men wasn't lost on the Imam's subjects. The overthrow of al-Badr marked the beginning of a long period of civil unrest in North Yemen. Prince Abdullah bin Hassan, the Imam's cousin, rallied royalist supporters in the hills to the north and began a struggle to put al-Badr back on the throne. It was a fight that appealed to the warlike nature of many of Yemen's tribesmen who, even in moments of relaxation, seemed unable and unwilling to forget they were warriors. The civil war between royalists and republicans had repercussions far beyond Yemen's borders and soon became a major cause of tension within the Arab world. Supplies of arms and ammunition for the royalists were sent from Saudi Arabia, whose own King Faisal had no wish to see a hostile anti-monarchist regime established on his doorstep. Camel trains carried the arms through some of the most difficult terrain in the world to royalist encampments in the Yemen hills. Royalist raids in country areas were very successful, and at the height of the war, Prince Abdullah and his men controlled most of the north and almost surrounded Sana'a itself. Ranged against them were 70,000 Egyptian troops hurriedly poured in to bolster up the Republican regime. The royalist forces were only denied ultimate victory by Egyptian fighter bombers. Fighting like this continued for 5 years. Ironically, the royalist offensive petered out largely because Saudi Arabia stopped supplying arms. With the emergence of an even more hostile anti-royalist regime in South Yemen, King Faisal transferred his support to the Republicans in Sana'a. In Sana'a today, there's an air of confidence and relaxation. The Republican regime has now secured much broader popular support by permitting former royalists to return and take up official positions in government and administration. It's also taken in about 300,000 South Yemeni dissidents, many of whom are determined to avenge the slaughter of their brothers. Keeping these hot-tempered tribesmen under control isn't easy, but it will have to be done if there's to be any chance of a lasting peace. The civil war and the centuries of royal rule that went before it stood in the way of any sensible economic planning. For 20 years before 1970, for example, agricultural production remained at a standstill. Now a start's been made to modernize the country. The bullock will slowly give way to the tractor. Subsistence farming will eventually be replaced by a market economy. Economic aid is flowing in from the United Nations, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. And there's the prospect of more to come from the United States, which established diplomatic relations with North Yemen this year. In contrast to South Yemen, the North has adopted a gradual approach to political and social reforms. Evolution, not revolution, is the watchword in Sana'a, and this has helped to create the climate of stability so vital to large-scale economic investment. North Yemen is still poor. Last year it had to borrow £5 million just to pay its civil servants. But its prospects look better now than they've ever done before. And that's all the more reason why it's in the North's best interests to settle the present conflict with South Yemen as quickly as possible. The war between the two Yemens is not the only fighting going on in southern Arabia. In Dhofar, a province of Muscat and Oman, Marxist rebels supported by South Yemen have been fighting a guerrilla campaign for the last 8 years. These soldiers belong to the 10,000-man army of Sultan Saeed bin Qaboos of Oman. Their job is to prevent the rebels taking control of Dhofar, from where they try to spread revolution throughout the Persian Gulf, which contains half the world's oil. So far, they've been successful, largely because they're equipped by the British government, supported by Britain's Air Force, and trained by a detachment of officers from Britain's Special Air Services Division.
training with the machine guns was good.
Yes.
The corporals seem to understand and are able to do the training. Okay?
Yes. Okay.
So for the rest of the day, I want you to stay here and you be in charge of the training with the corporals, and I want them to practice the stoppages
Yes.
and the firing and the IA drills on the guns.
Britain's been involved in Dhofar since the first rebel attacks in 1964. In those days, the old Sultan ruled and remained steadfastly indifferent to pleas from his own people and the British to improve conditions in his primitive and backward country. With oil revenues totaling £30 million a year, it was certainly not lack of money that prevented reforms. Finally, 2 years ago, the Sultan was overthrown with British help and replaced by his son. Since then, the war in Dhofar has gone steadily against the rebels.
At my command, number 3 at Dhofar. HG117, charge at 3. Number 3, loader. One, fire. One loader. Load. 900. Gone. 8 to fire. End of mission.
Southern Arabia is a crucial area in world politics, and its stability is vital for the welfare of all who have interests in it. Those who live there already seem to have recognized this, and the two Yemens have been using the offices of the Arab League to negotiate a settlement of their dispute. At meetings in Cairo, Aden and Sana'a, Arab League officials have tried to arrange a ceasefire. The most sensational result of these meetings, however, has been the proposal by both sides to create one united Yemen state. On the face of it, this seems a surprisingly friendly gesture from such bitter opponents. North and South Yemen are very different in their political philosophies, and the tribal hatreds that have been generated in the last 5 years are not likely to be forgiven or forgotten easily. To make a united Yemen a reality will demand a degree of patience and tolerance that neither side has shown in the past. The experience of other disputes between Arab states does not hold out much hope that the Yemen problem can be solved quickly or easily. There may be too many old scores to settle, too many deep wounds to heal. A truce has been negotiated, but a truce is not a settlement, and it may yet turn out that a real peace in the Yemen is as transient as the shifting sands that make up so much of this backward and barren land.